My name is Austin White, and this is my AP Research presentation. My presentation is on lead poisoning in the state of Alabama. So why is this important? Lead poisoning affects people across the United States and all across the world, and it has serious ramifications on public health. Considered a pollutant by the Environmental Protection Agency, also known as the EPA, without meaningful action, many people in the United States will be harmed by this public health crisis. So here's my gap in research. So right now there's a lack of research into how lead poisoning affects residents and citizens of Alabama. So this research study seeks to solve that issue. My research question is, to what extent does waterborne lead in the state of Alabama correlate with heightened rates of learning disabilities and physical impairment? The first source that I looked at was from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where researchers found that lead is classified as a neurotoxin, and that over 88% of schools in the United States do not regularly test their water concentrations for lead. So just for a little bit of context, there are no safe levels of lead in drinking water that are considered safe, as well as the older the building that is tested, the more likely that lead will be found in the water. Next, per the NIH, lead is a neurotoxin that causes extensive harm to the central nervous system and can cause a number of conditions such as memory loss, attention deficit disorder, and a number of other cognitive and behavioral disorders. Lastly, I looked at one source from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology that found that abatement measures when it comes to lead correlation in water is negatively correlated with levels of enrollment in special education programs. So more programs that are enacted by city governments and state governments around the country to control lead correlates with less money that has to be spent on special education programs in the future. So my survey design used studies and research experiments from different universities across the country, such as MIT, UNC Chapel Hill, and more, as well as non-governmental organizations such as the Environmental Health Review, Economic Policy Institute, and more. So using my survey instrument, I utilized a lead test from an FDA-approved company called JDW, which tests for a variety of substances within water, such as pH, bromine, alkalinity, and more. Here is a visual description of my survey instrument. Next, so specifically for lead testing, my data collection tool measures from 0 to 500 ppm, but since all levels of lead in water are considered abnormal, any level of lead found would be considered significant. So here's just a little bit of context on the area that I chose. So the population of Limestone County is a little bit under 100,000 residents, while the population of Madison County is about roughly 375,000 residents. So in order to find participants and homes to participate in my study, I randomly selected 5 homes from each Madison County district and 5 homes from each Limestone County district. So that is how I chose my sample. So just a little bit about my timeline. 5 homes in Madison County and 5 homes in Limestone County were chosen overall. So the data collection process took place in November and December of 2021, and the analysis was conducted on December 10, 2021. So the survey resulting sample. So as a result of the data collection process, minimal levels of lead were found in both Limestone and Madison County. Some trace levels of lead were found in Limestone County, but no levels of lead were found in Madison County. So here is a visual description of my data collection tool results. So here's my conclusion. It is clear that levels of lead that were found in the lead test were very small and subliminal, so there was not a large concentration of lead in either Madison and Limestone County. But there was one sample from Limestone County that did display trace levels of lead. So while I selected 5 samples of lead from Madison and Limestone County, it is still entirely possible that older buildings that were not included in my survey still have lead pipes and lead concentration in their water, as well as apartment complexes that do not regularly test their water concentrations for lead. So here is just a descriptive visual tool that illustrates my results in Madison County. So as a result of my experiment, I found that lead in water is not a significant concern in Madison County. It is still possible that older buildings and apartment complexes have lead in their water, but none were found in the conduction of my study. So further testing is necessary. It is clear that the levels are low enough to warrant the conclusion that water safety is not a threat to public health in Madison County. Next, this illustrates the results of my experiment when it comes to Limestone County. As you can see, in 4 of the 5 samples, we found no trace of lead, but in one of the samples, we did find lead concentration in the water. As conclusion, since Subliminal levels of lead were found in one sample, but the levels were not enough to accurately conclude that it was not due to errors in the data collection process or visual errors from the experimenter. Due to this, the levels of lead in limestone water was significantly low. As with Madison County, further testing is needed to determine if there are any other sources of lead interaction with people, such as blood, paint, soil, and water in significantly old buildings. So I'm going to give a little bit more on the makeup of both Madison and Limestone County. So just for context, Madison County is a little bit more diverse than Limestone County. So the population of Madison County is about 66% white, 25% black, 1% Native American, 3% Asian, and about 4.7% Hispanic of any race. Then when it comes to Limestone County, it's about 80% white, 13% black, 1% Asian, 1% Native American, and about 6% Hispanic of any race. So next, when it comes to income levels, the income level in Madison County is a little bit higher than the income level in Limestone County, with Madison County coming in at about $45,000 a year, while Limestone County comes in at about $37,000 a year. And this is significant because the more money that a government can take in, the more that it can use for government spending into infrastructure projects such as lead systems and revamping piping. So next, when it comes to poverty levels, in Madison County, about 11% of the population is below the federal poverty line, while in Limestone County, about 13% of the population is below the federal poverty line. The per capita income. In Madison County, the per capita income is about $23,000, while in Limestone County, it's higher at $24,000. And this is likely due because of the lower population in Limestone County. So here's my correlational analysis. So just for context, in the whole state of Alabama, about 32,000 students in the state of Alabama received special education treatment during the 2015-2016 academic school year. This comprises about 12.2% of students statewide. Here is a state profile of children with disabilities. So this just illustrates the different disabilities, whether it's an intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, or speech impairment that students across the state have. So next, the Limestone County and Madison County rates of disability. When it comes to Limestone County, about 14% of the population has some sort of physical disability or cognitive disability, while in Madison County, the rate of disability is a little bit lower at about 13%. So this is actually in line with the results of my experiment because 0% of the water samples in Madison County showed detectable levels of lead, while 1% in Limestone County did. So according to government databases and other non-governmental organizations, there is a larger number of disabilities in Limestone County than Madison County, consistent with the results that I received in my experiments testing for lead concentration. But due to the limited number of results, the correlation is weak. So here's my conclusion. Just to sum up my research question. To what extent does waterborne lead in Madison and Limestone counties correlate with disability, both learning and developmental? So there was a mixed validation of my results. While the results of my experiment did conclude that levels of lead in Limestone County were higher, it was not statistically significant to establish a strong correlation. Due to this, my hypothesis that heightened lead levels in Limestone County would result in more learning disabilities is majorly refuted. So here are key findings from my experiment. Lead in water is not a major problem in Madison or Limestone County, but it is possible that lead exposure comes from other sources, such as paint, dust, soil, folk medicine, and toys that were not included in my experimental process. Second, further testing is needed in order to determine if there is a correlation between lead concentration in water and the development of learning disabilities. Due to my experiment being limited in funding and a number of other factors, it was not possible to test blood and other factors that could have determined how much lead concentration was in the blood of many residents of Madison and Limestone County. Next, while my hypothesis was mostly rejected, there are indicators that Limestone County has higher levels of lead, such as lower government revenue, higher poverty levels, higher levels of learning disabilities, less government spending to fix lead pipes, and lastly, a more rural environment, so there's not as much industrialization in the area. So here's some of the limitations of my experiment. There was a limited sample size, limited time and resources for testing. I only tested water concentration, and I did not test other sources of lead that might be present, such as paints in buildings as well as blood concentration. So for future research, there needs to be more research into paint and soil, which can be other factors of contamination and lead concentration that exposes many residents of Limestone and Madison County. So potential research into lead concentration in blood would also be a very good avenue to pursue future experimentation, as well as more water sources in Limestone and Madison County, as well as expanding the sample size to other surrounding counties such as Marshall, Morgan, and Coleman. So here are my works cited.